Good evening, everybody. I'm Ken Lauder, and I'm with the Bur Oak Land Trust. I'd like to welcome all of you on this balmy early spring night. Thank you so much for coming out. It's really a great turnout tonight, and so I appreciate your coming. I was all set to give you all your marching orders tonight, but I've been talking to people who've had information about the state legislature today. There was a bill in the state Senate that would have struck a private person's ability to get a tax deduction for a conservation easement, and that would have put the Bur Oak Land Trust in deep trouble. But I'm told tonight that that bill never made it out of committee. So yeah, and I'm sure I'm not the only one in this group that had communicated with their state senator over this issue. So thank you so much for your help. And also, if you haven't done so already, if you're not a member of the Bur Oak Land Trust, I'd certainly encourage you to join us. It's fights like these that having extra people to swing a bat really helps, and so please give that a consideration. I'd like to have our board members stand up. Are any of our Bur Oak Land Trust board members here yet? Seth Zimmerman back in the corner. Looks like he's been out working property today. Thank you for that. Also, I want to introduce our Bur Oak Land Trust staff. I see Tammy Wright over here, who's our executive director. Thank you, Tammy. And Susan Spears. Where's Susan? Susan's back in the back. Thank you. And is Jason Taylor, our property stewardship specialist. And I also want to just take a minute to thank our sponsors tonight, because if it weren't for them, of course, we'd have trouble putting on this wonderful evening. So please hold your applause till after. The Iowa Living Roadway Trust Fund, the Iowa Native Plant Society, Project Green, and an individual, Star Wojciak, Western Fraternal Life, the City of Coralville, Lon and Barbara Drake, the Friends of Hickory Hill Park, Impact 7G, the Iowa Environmental Council, the Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation, Legacy Green Builders and Developers, the Modinger Group, and Osenbaugh's Prairie Seed Farms, and Tarragon. So to those of you who are sponsors tonight, thank you so much. We do have a few events coming up also this spring and summer, and we still need sponsorship opportunities for these events. We have our Family Days, the Music on the Prairie, that occurs down at Belgium Grove, south of town, and of course our Cider Moon auction, which occurs in the fall next year. So with that, I'm going to introduce Dick Baker, who's going to introduce our speaker tonight. Dick?
I've been involved with environmental studies and so forth for many decades, probably from before some of you were born. And I've done my own research on changing environments through time. And what I see now is that the causes of the biggest change that we've seen are humans right now. And everybody's growing up in the middles of cities. Nobody gets out in nature anymore. Just look around at our politicians, at any rate, that's why I'm always thrilled to come to this is my favorite meeting of anything, because we've got such a diverse group here that can make a big impact on the whole region. So with that small statement, let me introduce Dave Conrads is an associate director with the University of Iowa Recreational Services. He was hired in 1990 to be director of the Macbride Raptor Center and environmental education coordinator for the Macbride Nature Recreation Area. In 1991, he started the University of Iowa Wildlife Camps. And in 1998 and 99, he started the School of the Wild. Both programs designed to connect children and youth to the wild. What could be better? He currently oversees the staff programs and facilities at Macbride and is excited to see these programs reach beyond Macbride and help more and more Iowans to the wild. So let's give a big hand to him and encourage him.
Good evening, everybody. You are the brave ones that came out on to wave goodbye to the last blast of winter, right? Is this it? Is this it? Is this it? All right. Okay. So before you get too comfortable, I need you to do this. I need you to find someone, one person. I want two people to talk, one to another, and share with one another briefly. What was it that connected you to the wild? Why are you here tonight? If you're here tonight, it's because you care about the world around us, right? Huh? Okay. So I'd like you to talk to someone next to you. What was it that connected you? Have you always been connected? Was there an aha moment? So just do that for about a minute or two. Go ahead. All right. Hey, this is great. This is great. Here's my question. How many would identify that you really got connected to the wild? You've never not remembered being connected to the wild. How many are like that? Stand up if you would. All right. Okay. So you guys, for as long as you can remember, this is just a part of who you are. Go ahead, sit down. Okay. I identify with the second group where you had an aha moment or an aha experience. Would you stand up if you had one of those? Like where it was like, there was some moment or something like that. Yep. How many of you grew up in what you might call an urban area or maybe urban suburban area? Raise your hands. Okay. All right. I grew up in Cedar Falls, but I jokingly say I was raised in Waterloo, if you know anything about that. And I was at Central College in Pella, Iowa, and I was a pre-med major, and I hated it. And where's George Shrimper? I had John Bowles as my advisor at Central College. John Bowles wrote the book on mammals of Iowa, okay? George was the head of the Natural History Museum, and if you pull out the drawers and you see the voles and the mice and the bats, it's going to probably say J.B. Bowles on those. That was the guy who told me during a chemistry lab as he was walking through at the Vermeer Science Center, you need to get out of this stuffy lab and get out in the field. I had no idea what he's talking about, but it sounded good. I finally, my junior year, end of my junior year, I'm pre-med and I'm going nowhere. This is danger zone, right? And I took his course called Field Vertebrate Natural History. And the best thing about it was the textbook that had no numbers, no chemical equations, just a bunch of birds. He said, for lab, we're going to go birding. And I was, okay, that sounds cool. Meet at Vermeer Science Center at 6 o'clock. All right. Dr. Bowles, supper is during that time. He goes, did I say PM? All right. So So we went birding that first trip. Some of you might know this name, but one of my classmates was a non-traditional student named John Stravers. And so John was kind of like John Bowles' like field assistant. We went birding, and it was like just an awakening. That experience was an awakening. And so we went to Lake Red Rock, and we were birding and adding birds to the list. I had no idea about the diversity of birds, and it was just amazing. And we, on the south side of the lake is a place called White Breast, and it had a boat ramp. We went to the boat ramp. It was like this year where it was a cold March, and they put the spotting scope. This is 1986. They put the spotting scope on some open water way out in Red Rock where all these crows were around this open water. And one after another, my classmates were like, wow. I'm like, okay, I'm getting excited about birds, but couldn't get excited about crows until I put my eye to the lens, and they were all bald eagles. 1986, remember, okay? 1986. It's a little, now, of course, bald eagles outnumber crows. We might be, wow, crows, not a bald eagle. John Bowles said at that moment, you don't have to be a doctor. Couldn't have been more liberated. Told my parents. Dad said, follow your heart. Mom said, can you get a job doing that? Anyway, here we are. So you see the screen here, UI Wild. UI, University of Iowa, we are recreational services. My boss, Brian Baxter, raise your hand. Okay, so he's grading me. And I'd like to call it recreational services, because think about it is about recreation. And when we talk about wild, we use this little acrostic, wildlife instruction and leadership development. We'll come back to that. We work out of the Macbride Nature Recreation Area, Macbride Nature Recreation Area. It's 500 acres. It's a peninsula. We have the Coralville Lake to the west and the south, and Lake McBride State Park to the north. They're great neighbors. We lease the land for the Corps of Engineers, and this is where we do our work. Tamara Elliott is our land manager. Where's Tamara? Right over here. Stand up so people can see you. If you want to learn something about land management, and I know her and Jason have been working on things together, she's been remarkable for us. We had a maintenance guy before who was able to keep the roads clear and the grass cut. Now we have a land manager, and that's amazing. So Tamara does great work, and this is where we play. As I said, about 500 acres. If you look at the old plat maps, it's described as Oak Barrens. This is in the Big Grove Township, and it was an oak savanna. And if you go through there, you can still see the remnants of it. It's a white oak savanna. I don't even know how many bur oaks we even have, very few, but it's mainly white oak savanna. And you'll see them, the big stately ones, that are got their arms spreading and reaching, and have all these other, maples and basswoods crowding them out, right? But we're about the business of trying to recreate it and bring it back to the savanna it once was. And this is where we do our work. It's also, by the way, home to Rusty Patch. But I've heard that everybody is getting these in their backyards, even here in town. So maybe it's not as exciting. It was to us when we first found it. So we have three main environmental education programs at Macbride. We have the Iowa Raptor Project, which is more than just education. We'll get to that in a moment. The University of Iowa Wildlife Camps, and the School of the Wild program. The Iowa Raptor Project began back in 1985 when the University of Iowa Recreational Services had a grad student who said, hey, now that recreational services is taking over this land, which is what happened, we took it over at that time. He's like, I got this idea to start this Raptor program and then to do some environmental education activities. His name was Burke Miller. And so he built that program up, and in 1990, he had left, and that's when I was hired to come in to replace him. Two of the things that we really focus on at the Iowa Raptor Project are research and education. So Sean Hawks, right over here. Sean, you want to just say hi? Yeah, there he is. He'll be sitting up here in a little bit, though. Sean grew up in Iowa, and he was a volunteer with us with the Kirkwood when he was at Kirkwood as in their program, their Parks and Natural Resources program. Went on to Upper Iowa, and then got his graduate degree with a former Iowan named Jim Greer, probably the leading bald eagle biologist, arguably. So really cool Iowa connections. We were able to lure him from Hawkwatch International to come back and lead the program. And one of the things that we are working towards is developing our research activities. So for the past several years, we've done these things called winter raptor surveys, where we have 6 different routes here in Johnson County, and we're trying to, by consistently counting birds of prey here during the winter months, to identify the uses of these lands, and as land changes, how does that affect populations and so forth. So, and this is a snowy owl that Adam Chia, one of our volunteers, a photo he had taken just outside of North Liberty a couple years ago. We also are beginning some work on the American Kestrels. Sean's working with Brandon McDougall with the University of Iowa, who's working on his PhD. And so we're really beginning to see, like, what's recreational services doing in this kind of business? Well, it's all about recreation, and it's really cool to see happen. So we're learning again, the kestrels are declining in certain areas of its range, and we're trying to figure out what's going on. And again, kind of like with the winter raptor surveys, looking at gradients, urban, suburban, rural, wild areas. Where are they populating and what's going on there? We just, from 1992, for the next 20 years, we worked really close with Cornell College and Bob Black, who is since deceased. Bob was a dear friend, and we had done a lot of work doing hawk migration studies. And we're looking again to maybe reinitiate some of that work. These are a couple of hawks we caught this past fall on our land, a couple of red tails. We've also worked with the Fish and Wildlife Service and the USDA. On the left is Emily Taylor. Is Emily here tonight? Emily is one of our volunteers and a UI student and was an intern with us. And this is a bald eagle that was, radio telemetry was put on it by some folks out of the Quad Cities with Fish and Wildlife Service to just document where they're moving. And I think the main part of their work was to look at the possibly wind farm effects on them.
How they use the land away from the rivers for potential siting of wood farms.
Yeah, so they were just looking at how they're using lands away from the rivers as people are looking at wind farms and how that might affect them. On the right, you see some blood being drawn from a red-tailed hawk we had trapped, just checking for avian influenza. This was a couple years ago with the USDA. So there have been some really cool partnerships that are happening, with the work we're doing and with other agencies out there. Education is also a huge part of the Iowa Raptor Project. We have 16 birds of prey representing 10 species on display to the public 365 days a year. Next year will be 366 days. Okay, you're still awake. Good. This is one of our, all of our birds are non-releasable. Some of them have physical ailments like Wanago, who's missing the left eye. Others are imprinted, so they're physically okay, but they're just not releasable because psychologically they're not thinking in a healthy way and could be dangerous. But we have the educational display. We also offer educational programs. Here's a group of University of Iowa students. We do raptor tours. We go off-site and do our Iowa Birds of Prey program. And there's other talks that Sean and Laura's right over here. Laura, raise her hand. The Raptor Project it's a University of Iowa program, but Kirkwood in the late 80s began to partner with us and still does. And so Laura is actually a employee of Kirkwood Community College. We're really excited about that continued partnership. One of the cool things that Laura started for us a couple years ago, 3 years ago, I don't know, time flies, but a program called Family Days. How many have been to Family Days at the Raptor Project? 3 years, okay? Every first Saturday of the month, everyone, we have Family Days. And it has been amazing, the turnout that we've had with people coming out. On January of this year, the first Saturday in January of this year, we had 600 people come through between 11 and 3 o'clock. Now, of course, the weather felt like September, but that was still remarkable to us, that there is, and this is a way that we're connecting families and kids with the wild through raptors. There's something about raptors. Gary Larson, do you know who I'm talking about? Yeah. The cartoonist, Far Side. One of my favorite Far Side cartoons had Now this is going to date me, but it had these raptors in a tree with sunglasses and Walkmen. Remember those things called Walkmen? And the caption said, "Birds of prey know they're cool." But there's something about raptors that capture our imagination, and we love raptors, but they also are iconic symbols for the things they represent, especially habitats. And if Bur Oak Land Trust isn't about habitat, I don't know what they are about. And if we're not preaching habitat, I don't know what we're doing, right? Healthy habitats. So I was hired in 1990 again. I was 25. And then my boss said to me that winter, he goes, "I want you to start a nature camp for kids." And I'm like, what? I did not know what I was doing. I mean, I knew a little bit about raptors, and I was doing these one-day field trips, and you can get by with a one-day field trip. You can survive it. But to do camps, I had no idea. I said, first of all, I don't want to call it nature camps because I'm sorry if it offends you, but it sounded boring to me. I said, let's call it wildlife camps. Okay, maybe it's not that big a deal, but to me it was. So we started this thing called wildlife camps in 1991, and I want to point out the first guy I called, I'm like, I cannot do this alone, and I'm going to have him stand up. Ed Saylor. Ed, please stand. And yes. I want to tell you something. We wouldn't be where we're at with education without Ed Saylor. You can call him a lot of things. Environmental Ed, conservation Ed. I call him the patriarch of this. He's done a lot to kind of lay the groundwork. He had been doing these things called eco camps for maybe middle school age kids. But when it came to wildlife camps, this was a whole different level. And I needed Ed, and we brought a couple of women to join us to start it off. And the first year, we had 6 weeks of these camps. We wanted, again, to introduce kids to habitats. We had 3 camps that we repeated. Hawk camp focused on woodlands, falcon camp on prairies, eagle camp on wetlands, and then repeat. So we had 6 weeks of that. And we had 192 kids, though I wasn't counting. And that was pretty exciting. And the next year we're like, well, let's have 40 kids a week, 240. Wow, this is pretty exciting. And what were we doing? We were letting nature do the work. I mean, it's almost embarrassing how small our budget was for materials because we just let nature do the work. You don't need fancy stuff. So we really wanted it to be hands-on, like this little tree frog. And then we wanted to incorporate some just outdoor rec stuff. On the right, I don't know if you can see that very well, but Chad Swope, right here. Chad is our assistant director for wildlife camps and an instructor in School of the Wild. And he went to be trained, and Meredith, you went too, right? To be trained to do recreational tree climbing. How many have ever heard of that? So here we have a tiny little tree frog hands-on and a giant Tilia americana, which is what? Thank you, Mr. Vitosh, a basswood. And we have a basswood here, and I don't know if you know this, but here's one kid. Don't let it scare you. We only lost 3 last year. We think they're still up there. But it's actually an incredibly safe thing because the kids actually have full control themselves to go up and down. And it's really pretty amazing. So wildlife camps is about getting them up there. What's really cool about this particular tree that we picked, I'll show you this in action a little bit right here. Not too far away in an ash tree was a Cooper's hawk nest. And so here the kids are basically Hawkeye view, of this. And this past year we renamed where we hold hawk camp is in this place called the Sumac Shelter. And this year I'm like, why don't we just use the raptor theme throughout the area? So all of our trails are renamed after raptors. All of our shelters are named after raptors. And we're naming the shelters after the camps that meet there. So we just had renamed Sumac Shelter to Hawk Shelter. And lo and behold, we had a Cooper's hawk nest like 50 yards from it. So there you go. Right by Hawk Ravine Trail. No lie. You can't make this up. So we started out with those 3 camps, Hawk, Eagle, Falcon. Well, here's your summer list now. I don't know if you can see that in the back, but Meredith, our wildlife camps director, has created a number of camps for kids from preschool, Beak Brigade, all the way down to an instructor and training program called Kestrel Corps for those in high school. You name it. If it's a raptor, we probably have a camp named after it, or at least focusing on it. But it's not all about the raptors, though that's part of our teaching, but it is about using those raptors as icons for subjects. Last year, we had 1,700 kids in our local wildlife camps. The camps are 5-day day camps. We talked at one time about being an overnight camp and said that'd be stupid. So we decided to just do a day camp because we didn't want to burn out our staff and all the extra expense of that. And here's what we learned. By doing a day camp, we got feedback pretty much every day from families. The kids would come home, they'd sit around the table, and they would tell the stories of everything they'd done. And so vicariously, the whole family was connected to what the kid was doing. And then we learned after supper they'd go right to sleep. You've heard of this term carrying capacity. It's always been in my mind, though I can't really document this, it's just kind of a gut feeling that we have a carrying capacity on our 500 acres. There's only so many we can bring on, so many we can do. The 5-day camps, most of them are around 40 kids in each camp. The camps are scattered throughout Macbride. Monday through Friday, these camps of 40 are divided into 8 campers in a group, and we have 5 instructors, so they rotate through the instructors Monday through Friday. We do not have, okay, at 10 o'clock you're doing this, 11 o'clock you're doing this, 12, no. We get there, be back here at the end of the day. Put away your watch. There's power in that. Not all the camps operate that way, but that's when it's running its best, the clocks are put away till the end of the day, and off we go. And we want to spread them out so they all feel like they're on a different part of the land. We took this model, knowing that we have a carrying capacity at Macbride, we began to think about how do we bring this beyond Macbride and through other parts of the state. Jay Gorsh, right here, is director of our School of the Wild program, but we've also assigned him with helping develop wildlife camps at state parks. And this will be our 3rd year. Anyone want to guess what state park this is? Macocata Caves. Good job. All right. Give them a t-shirt. Here's where we're going to be this year. 14 state parks. And the goal from the DNR, do you know what 2020 is for the DNR state parks? Do you know what's special about that? Their 100th anniversary of state parks. Backbone was the very first one. So in 2020, we'll be in Backbone, we'll be in 20 state parks, and Jay has his work cut out for him. It's going to be amazing. But this is a way to bring, to look at land and say, hey, there's only so much you can do. Let's bring this to the other places. Now, we know how much the DNR is pouring into their state parks. So they were very happy to hear us come along and say, hey, let's partner. One of the things, too, that we're beginning to see is connecting more with county conservation boards because they have the naturalists. State parks have, if they're lucky, have both a manager and a ranger, right? Not all of them do. So those who are staffing them have double duty of ranger and manager, and there's no way they can do education as well. So we come alongside, and in some of these places, we're getting county conservation board folks to work as well. So at George Wythe in Cedar Falls, Waterloo area, we have Black Hawk County Conservation Board who has provided their staff to help us with it. And it's just been amazing to see the quality of these staffs coming together to introduce kids throughout the state of Iowa to the wild. So these wildlife camps are going so awesome, but I hated the one-day field trips I was doing during the school year because I was realizing in the wildlife camps, you're developing relationships with kids because you'd not only have them for a full week, but you might have a kid who signs up all summer long, and you really get to know them. Let me tell you this story about a kid that we almost kicked out of camp. And I won't say his name in case he still lives in the area. I've kind of lost track of him. but this is a long time ago. But he was having a really rough time, and it was tough for all of us. He was, I think, second grade and just very unruly, and it was really, really challenging. And he was taken away from the experience of all the other kids. And at the end of the week, we as a staff were actually gathering, and if I talk to Ed right now, he'd probably remember this, talking about maybe we should talk to Mom because we know the kid was signed up for the next week, that this isn't working. Maybe there's something else for him, that would work. Before we had a chance, she came up to us that Friday and said, I just want to tell you how much fun my son had this week. Can't wait to come back next week. I think she's lying. No, I think she wasn't, but we just didn't see it. So what we came up with a strategy. We're like, okay, with this kid, we are going to have this kid every day write down every new experience he had and then share with us at the end of the day something new that he learned. And I'll never forget the day he came up to us and said he discovered all about earwax. And Mary Vimetal said, iridescence. Whatever. I don't know if it was that year or maybe a year later. I remember I was walking with a group of 8 kids down the road. I still remember where I was at. And he just came up beside me and goes, Dave, yeah, my mom and dad are getting a divorce. See, what we learned in wildlife camps was relationships were being formed. And when relationships are formed, you can actually do some real teaching and real loving. And I'll never forget that. And trying to talk him through it. So one night, at the end of in the summer of '95, I was not looking forward to one-day field trips in the fall, where kids come off the bus and maybe by noon they're ready to learn, and I never learned their name. And you probably can't read this, but it was 4 a.m. I woke up, and I grabbed my journal and I wrote down, how can we bring this into the school year? Because all the kids that come out to camp, frankly, were kids from middle and upper class families, and predominantly folks that look like us in this room. And when I know what I know about the Iowa City School District, it didn't look like what we were doing in the summers. We applied for, so I wrote down this idea of we take the best of wildlife camps. We'd take every Iowa City elementary school at the time, which was maybe six, I think is only 16. We're up to what, 20, 21, 20, 22? See? And we were looking at how can we bring all these kids out. I applied to the EPA for a grant, $5,000 because, and they gave us money to do it. Now we're committed. So that paid for the first 5 schools, the spring of 1998. Mary Sue Coleman was president at the time she came out. We released a red-tailed hawk. Hills Elementary was the very first one, Adam, Hills' parent. It was pretty awesome because I don't think we saw very many Hills kids in wildlife camps, but we saw every one of them we called it Wild 2000, but we changed it to School of the Wild later. We got another grant from the state of Iowa, REAP grant, to pay for the rest of the schools in 98-99 school year. Then the 99-2000 school year, we called it School of the Wild, not SOW, so. And that was when every Iowa City school began coming on their own, paying their own way. And ever since then, except for a few, just a little, almost every student who's come through has been taking part in a full week-long program. We have a 5-day rotation. Iowa City schools now actually have made it mandatory for all 6th graders to go through this program. How crazy is that? UI Community Credit Union, is it going to be Green State for sure? Okay. Green State, yeah, whatever. We're getting their green. So actually, we aren't. It's going to the Iowa City School District Foundation, and they are a dominant contributor to help make it so that every kid in the district can do a full week experience with us out at School of the Wild. So we took the best of wildlife camps. We have a 5-day rotation. We have Woodlands. Now, what's this have to do with where is this? The Lake McBride Spillway. What do you see as the backdrop along the shoreline there? Lots of woodlands, right? So their reward for Woodlands is at lunch they will hang out and play in the spillway area here at Lake Macbride State Park. But Woodlands is a place where we have them do a still hunt, where they just sit still. Kids who've never been in the woods, sit still, can't see anybody else, sit here for minutes and record what you see, what you observe. Get them to slow down. For a lot of our kids, my kids go to Kirkwood Elementary. A number of their classmates come from South Chicago. They're terrified to be out in the wild. They feel safer in South Chicago than they do out here. Too many movies, whatever. And it's amazing to see transformation. Woodlands is one of our days. Wetlands is another. This is a Great Hills Elementary story. We had committed to only go with one grade level, if I remember correctly, and they decided to bring 2 grades out, which we weren't too excited about because we hadn't been planning for that. Well, one of the kids in one of the grades that wasn't supposed to be out there happened to net one of these in a pond on Lake Macbride State Park, and it's called a central newt or an eastern newt. A central newt is a subspecies never before found in Johnson County. Hills Elementary kid with an amazing discovery. All the herpetologists went crazy. Chad was there. AP picked it up. The kids were excited, and that's awesome. That's what we want. Is that hands-on experience and discovery and even increasing our knowledge of natural history. Don't let anybody tell you natural history is dead, right, George? Prairies is our other day. This is our one, it's not even big, it's our one real true remnant at Macbride, and Jay's leading that group there. We're exposing kids to all these habitats. We want them to understand what these are. When they hear them or read about them, we want them to be citizens who know what these things are. So when we get crazy bills that come to Des Moines that talk about, not, increasing lands for conservation, that we'll have a citizenship beyond just people that look like you and me in this room who value what's going on. Of course, birds are a big part of what we do out there. So we have an ornithology unit, and I should have had a picture here of Meredith holding a songbird, because about every kid who's come through the district in the past 20 years has had a chickadee laying on its back in their hand. But this, I liked this one just because, again, frankly, it captures the diversity of the kids that we're reaching out to. And you can see the interest and the wonder for the most part. We've also added a group. Well, I'm going to go back here. I want to point this out. When I originally came up with a list of activities, you probably in the back can't read the last thing on the list. What do you see? What do you read the last thing on the list for activities? You can read my writing. Ethics. Ethics was a big thing for me. And I didn't know, look at the activities I had listed behind ethics. Well, we've called it a bunch of things. We called it outdoor adventures one time. We called it land and the people. We're calling it archaeology now. We want to provide an opportunity for kids to think about what does it mean to live in a sustainable way on the land. We happen to have this amazing foundation of an old farm that belonged to a family named Mahaffey. You ever heard of that? It's right on our land. It's amazing, just the foundations. We call it the ruins because it's got to be exciting, right? So the ruins. And they also build like their own structures in a floodplain forest. And then a few years ago, we worked with the Office of the State Archaeologist to add something more. And that is, how did those before us live on the land? This is Jonathan and Suzanne Buffalo from the Meskwaki settlement. And they came, we had picked out an area, we thought it looked really good. They came, they said, oh, this is great. It has a great vista of the water all the way around. And then they came, and they helped with constructing our first wiki up out there. Now, of course, with the flooding we had, we're going to have to maybe look at shoring things up, no pun intended. But it was really awesome to incorporate people who live right up the river from us today. It's not like ancient past, right? This is present day. They're still making wiki-ups, and we wanted that to then be part of what we teach and talk about what does it mean to live on the land in a sustainable manner. Jay has had a vision. He just is finishing up his PhD. He has a real heart for making sure that everybody gets a chance. So if there's kids with special challenges, he's going to find a way to make it happen. And sometimes we often forget some of our older kids who maybe, traditional school isn't, maybe the best way for them to go. So he's really worked hard to connect Tate High School and then also students with TREC, which is closing after this year. But if you know anything about the Theodore Roosevelt Education Center, you know that this is a group of kids who need a lot of love. And Jay has given them that love, and he's gotten some amazing response from that. So when we think about what we do, I'm going to just show you a 3-slide sequence that as I was going through slides to try to think about how do we tie this together and how do we then go from here. The thing that we've discovered, and again, we haven't done any formal assessment to kind of capture it, is just kind of that gut feeling. Like the first thing that we do for a lot of these students is to awaken awareness. Point things out. Make them aware of something that they weren't aware of before. You might recognize who's with me here. This is Liz Christensen. So she's not a child, but whatever. So then, that first shot was from the hawk blind. Then we trapped this red-tailed hawk. We're able to show her like the various features of this young red-tailed hawk, kind of nurturing an appreciation for things. And that's what we want to do in all of our stuff, is not just awareness of facts, but nurture an appreciation. Because we all have facts, but we don't care until there's a real appreciation. And then we hope that it inspires action, where we have people then who act in a way that shows a genuine knowledge and love for things wild. That's what we're about. And that's what, when you think about your stories, how you were raised, or maybe those special experiences you have. For me, it was when they said do a nature camp for kids, all I could think of is exposing them the way I was exposed by John Bowles and people like him. And that's what we are really about. I'm gonna ask the team to come up here. This is your opportunity I'm always teased at Rec Service, like, I've got this all-star cast, and they are. And I'm going to ask them to come on up here. You actually have little, you'll see your name here. So Meredith Caskey is our Director of Wildlife Camps. Chad Swope is Assistant Director of Wildlife Camps, but also instructor in School of the Wild. Meredith is the Ornithology instructor in School of the Wild. Jay Gorsh, Director of School of the Wild. And then, as I mentioned, he's in charge of the State Park Wildlife Camps. Sean, Director of the Raptor Project, and then Laura, Assistant Director of the Raptor Project. These are some of the best educators we have around, and I couldn't be more proud. But I want to give you guys a chance to any Q&A, any questions you might have about, how we might better, or any questions you might have about connecting people with the wild, especially youth. Yes.
Well, it looks like you've done an amazing job with the kids, and you've been doing it for a while. So have any of those come through that you'd consider hiring so that the teachers are as diverse as the students?
Tamara Elliott, would you stand up? Our land manager went through our program. And so great question. And she's done it, and it's awesome. It's pretty cool to see. Here's one thing I failed to mention is that, and this is a big thing, like you saw, mainly kids. When we started School of the Wild, the College of Education said, we want to send our elementary ed majors to do a practicum with you all to see what it's like to teach outside. For 20 straight years, every elementary ed major has done a practicum with us at School of the Wild. Now they do 2 practicums even. And this spring, Jay is going to have 2 student teachers. We've never had that before. And probably because we're actually an accredited school. It's not a camp during the school year. It's actually a school accredited. You've heard of the North Central Association for Higher Education. Advanced Ed is now the name for schools like ours, and so we've been accredited. Yes?
I wondered whether you've been doing this for many years, whether you have students maybe 5, 10, 15 years later come up to you and say, you've changed my life, and how has it changed? And do they appreciate nature more because of this? I would sure hope so.
I was gone for a long time. I'm going to give this to the team to maybe. Yes, the question was, has anybody come up to you, 10, 15, 20 years later and said, what you did really changed my life or changed the course of my life and such like that? Meredith is, I moved to Michigan in 2000. I hired her right before leaving, and so she's been the most tenured of the group out here.
To talk to, have we had people come through that work with us that attended, and then also if it's changed their life, I hope it's changed their life. But we have a number of staff that attended as campers. We have now that this is my 20th summer coming up, I have campers that are children of campers that I first had. And I'm proud of that. I find that a point of pride, not feeling old, but that they feel it is a value. And so they continue to come. And I love hearing about our staff that are going on to other projects, other careers, other professions, whether it's in environmental education, whether it's in ecology, biology, sciences, education. I'm proud of all of them, and we're lucky we get to work with so many people through our programs.
Dick, I would encourage you, if you see someone who seems like they're junior high or high school, like maybe they're bagging something at Hy-Vee, and just ask them, did you go to School of the Wild? And then get their response. Because you'd be surprised. I mean, how often, it's almost embarrassing. I've heard this from elementary schools at 6th grade graduations, and I asked the students, what's your favorite memory from your elementary school experience? They said School of the Wild, which is, yeah, but that says something about the power of being outside. Yes?
You mentioned that with wildlife camps, you have a narrow socioeconomic group that you seem to attract. Is there any effort to try to remedy that?
Yep. I'll let...
Yes, we have been working with a couple different organizations to provide scholarships, and we're looking at grants to provide scholarships because we do want it to be equitable for everyone. We don't want it to be something that is just a privilege. So we have goals that we've set, and we're trying to get to those every summer.
One example of that would be there's a Healthiest State initiative, if anyone's heard of that. Within that program is 5210. It's let me think here. 5 servings of fruits and vegetables, 2 hours or less screen time, 1 hour of activity, exercise, and 0 sugary drinks. So this is an initiative that's going on around the state. They're really trying to push that equation or that prescription for better health for our kids. Just this summer, they committed to $16,000 in scholarships. So that will send 50 to 60 kids to wildlife camp. And so we'll specifically target students who either financially or for whatever other reason would not be allowed or able to attend camp. So.
And that would be for more of our state park camps. Specifically, what Meredith was referring to is a program called Summerships through United Way. And like she said, we've set some goals to really see the, for those coming from a lower socioeconomic condition to be able to participate. Other questions? Yes.
This is Iowa Leopold Week. Do you use Leopold in your program?
Well, that's funny you'd say that. You saw the word ethics earlier, right? Oftentimes, the question is, it's Leopold Week, so out celebrating Aldo Leopold. If you haven't read Sand County Almanac, you should. And because that was very formative for me, and we use that language a lot about developing a land ethic. And so that ethics piece you saw there was straight out of Sand County Almanac, all right? That's where I was thinking, and that's what we try to promote, especially in that Archaeology Day, and really everything we do is that developing that land ethic. We in fact, in the past, we've talked about wanting to develop a Leopoldian land ethic in our kids. So thanks, good question. Hi, Dan Maskell. Dan is a retired teacher from the district. He was part of that very first group with the School of the Wild. Both Ed and Dan were part. I think Coralville Central and Lemmy and Hills and a couple others were a part of that. So thanks for walking in. And he's also working now with us. He's retired and teaching part-time with us with School of the Wild. Any other questions? Yes, Rick.
I don't have a question. I just have a little story. One time, a long time ago, you called me up and asked if I could cover for you for one day. So I said yes, and I go out to where you were meeting the children, and the first kid I see is this kid from up the street who is in the neighborhood was hell on wheels. One of my memories is him being up on the roof of the house across the street and his parents coming down the street yelling at him. And I thought, oh, what am I going to do with him? He recognized me and sort of appointed himself as my helper. It worked fine.
Awesome. Beautiful.
Thanks.
You know, I think all of us can talk from our staff. You know, we have a big issue with kids diagnosed with ADHD on medication. I can't tell you how many I've heard from who said, I do terrible in school, but I do great out here. Or I learned so much this week, but it was fun.
So I know a lot of us in the audience are informal or formal educators. We probably all have really great stories of connecting kids with nature. If nobody's dying to ask a question, maybe we could tell stories. Of like, maybe we could up here share a story of maybe something that happened. Do you really?
Yes.
Okay.
I remembered it when Rick was telling his story. When we talk about trying to nurture awareness, appreciation, and action, I had a group of kindergartners a few summers ago that were bird banding with me, and we caught a chickadee. And I always say, if we're only going to catch one bird, this is the one I want to catch because we can all hold it safely. And that experience of holding a live animal in your hand, feeling the feathers, feeling the heartbeat, feeling the warmth of that bird, that's going to stay with them. That's why we do that. That's going to stay with them, and that's going to grow that appreciation and hopefully their ethics in caring for the land. Well, I got through the whole group. There was 20 of them, got through all of them, placing the bird, in my mind, counting 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, moving it to the next hand. Got through everybody, got to the last camper, and she looked up at me with these big eyes and said, Miss Meredith, I know why it lets us do this. And I thought, oh, this is going to be good. I can't wait to hear what she says. And she just point blank said, it knows we love it.
Oh, gosh.
And that's what it boils down to. We do. And so that was a very moving moment for me. Is that a good one, Laura?
That's awesome. Okay, so recently one of my favorite ways to connect kids to nature is to let them eat nature. So recently I've been taking them down into the woods, and we collect nettles, wood nettle. And actually Carmen, who might be in the audience, Black, was the one who started doing this. And I had only just heard about it, but I thought, gosh, she's crazy. There's like, they sting you. I mean, how can you really eat those? But yeah, you can. You just, cut the tops off with some gloves, get the kids involved. They learn all about nettles. We come back up out of the woods. We literally build a campfire, make nettle soup. It can be vegetarian if it needs to be. Add some potatoes, blanch the nettles, chop them up with a special rocker chopper. So, I mean, they're getting into cooking. They're eating from the woods. I tell them about the nutritional quality, and I had one kid say, it's kind of like the kale of the forest. I'll never forget that. It was just awesome.
Okay, so my turn for a story. So I was hired 3.5 years ago, something like that, to take over for the patriarch. And I knew what School of the Wild was. I had come out to visit Ed and Meredith and Chad a few times while I was working on my my graduate work at the university. And I had helped with wildlife camps a little as well. And so I started the job, and I think we were probably in our third week, maybe second or third week, and we had a school come out where a high percentage of the population has probably not spent a whole lot of time. It's kind of what we were talking about with some diversity, and have not spent a lot of time in nature. haven't had the opportunity to enjoy the outdoors. And within my group of, I think it was 13 kids, there were 3 girls that were especially turned off by the whole experience. It was day one of School of the Wild for them. And they wanted nothing to do with it. Not going to the bathroom in the porta potty was absolutely unacceptable. They were going to hold it all day long and wait till the end of the day. They were going with me into the prairie, which meant grass, and they really didn't want to deal with that, and bugs, and they certainly didn't want to deal with bugs. We stumbled across a daddy longleg, of course, early in our exploring, and they were deathly afraid. And the 3 girls were not the only ones who were deathly afraid. By lunchtime, we were sitting in a picnic spot in the grass, and a daddy longleg crawled up on my arm on cue. And one of the students noticed it. And we took turns passing the daddy longleg from arm to arm. And every student in the group, including my 3 that were deathly afraid, let it crawl across their arm. So we start at 9. I like lunch early. In 2.5 hours, we had gone from wanting nothing to do with it to allowing this to happen for that crew. So that's when I started to understand the power of School of the Wild and what makes it unique and special. So.
For me, I guess it's more of a hands-on experience. I'm a hands-on biologist. I like adventure. So the idea of catching a hawk and then getting a kid or anybody to release it it can be an amazing experience. Or I can remember we caught up one of our bald eagles, and we put, basically it's a constraining, we call it an ABBA, but it's kind of a straight jacket, and we had to trim its beak so they got to watch it, but then we also got to let the kids hold it safely. And all that is an amazing experience for the kids. And then who knows where they will go. I mean, I've had some amazing adventures just starting out here, and I personally have traveled to Alaska a couple of different times and got to see 7 polar bears. And McGill Schrum, who was a person that started with the wildlife camps.
Former camper.
As a former camper. And she wrote this, we hired an intern through Kirkwood, and she wrote this amazing cover letter. And we hired her, and she went out with us, not only educating folks, but we were banning, putting telemetry on young bald eagles. And she eventually went to Hawkwatch International and spent a fall in the Central Cascades of Washington. And now she's up in southeastern Minnesota as a fellowship with, what is it?
With the Eagle Valley Environmental Education Center?
Eagle Bluff.
Eagle
Eagle
Bluff,
Bluffs.
yeah.
So it's quite a fellowship to get, actually. So, yeah, it's not really a story, but it's just the way.
Well, part of McGill's story, I think, in her cover letter was that she sold lemonade in order to raise money to adopt a raptor for the Raptor Center when she was a kid. We had to hire her.
One more story, and I know we'll keep rolling here. So, Chad.
No, so really, for me, what really kind of shown to me like the impact that the School of the Wild had actually came from my wife. At one time, she was a mental health coordinator at North Central Junior High, and so many times she'd have kiddos come to her office and just really closed off and not talking, just trying to figure out what's going on with them. And her one go-to was always School of the Wild. Because she'd have them, 7th or 8th grade, and all the 6th graders come out, and she would, her one thing, like if they're not talking, not responding to anything, he's like, well, when you're in elementary, did you go to School of the Wild? And they're like, yeah. Do you remember, I get to teach the Wetlands, so I get to take them to we have a place called Spider Pond, a little pond that's, we have ropes tied to the trees like a spider web, so the canoes are like a spider crawling in the spider web. They don't get paddles, they get nets on long poles, and they're using the ropes to pull the canoes around, and they're catching turtles and frogs. And so she's like, oh, they remember School of the Wild? She's like, did you go to Spider Pond? Yeah. Like, do you remember Chad? Yeah. It's like, that's my husband. And then they opened up. That was their connection. And so that was the one thing. And then they would talk for a long time about School of the Wild. And so I just know that was always, to me, it's like, wow, that's, we're making a really big impact on a lot of kids.
Mm-hmm. We really appreciate your time. I know we've come to the close here, but so this is our story, but this is your story. All the things that you do in revolving around conservation and the preservation of this good earth are powerful things. And the more you can bring others into it with you, give them those experiences. We can't reach them all, but together we can. I want to encourage you to think about that. What's that look like? And we, again, are very grateful and honored to be able to present tonight. So thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. Gosh, what a treasure.
I know.
I've just got 3 more things to talk to you about. First of all, I was remiss in not thanking the Five Seasons Garden Club for the cookies and the drinks just down the hall. Thank you. And along the lines of what we're doing for children, I was also remiss in not talking to you about the Land Trust Explorer Passport. I don't know how many of you known about this program, but it's a program we've got designed especially for children. We have 7 properties that are highlighted in this little passport book. And when you go to each of our properties, there's a sign at the parking lot there, and the sign has a little raised image on the top of the sign. The children can make a little rubbing with a pencil of that image on each of those 7 properties. And then when it's completed, the kid can take these passports to Hills Bank, and they'll open a bank account and pop $5 in that child's account. So it's a way of, like these folks have done ever so well, getting kids out in the woods. And so grab a passport and take your kids, or probably more likely grandkids, out to the properties. And finally, we've got a donation bucket out on the hall on your way out. So if you've got a few extra shekels in your pocket, don't hesitate to pop them in the donation bucket, which will help us support another program like this next year. And with that, thank you so much for coming tonight, and I hope it was enjoyable. It certainly was for me. Thank you.